face this like I wasn't Mexican enough to the Mexicans and I wasn't white enough to the white kids. And I am half white. So like
Oh, okay.
obviously looking yeah, like looking at me, you would just think I'm straight up Latina, or
Hmm.
something. Some people don't even think that. Like as I got older, I got, Middle Eastern, Native
Yeah, yeah. A brown
American,
girl.
yeah. And then when I started as a social worker, my kids would be like, "Nah, you're black and white." And like they would
Oh,
just like,
wow. Go ahead, go
oh
ahead.
no, I was just gonna say that was the hardest part for me. I think in elementary school was just the socioeconomic differences, and like I said, the family differences. Feeling like I was around people who were all came from, they had both their biological parents, they were married, they had
Same
the,
race, same culture.
very,
Yeah.
yep, all of that. And I just felt like I was dealing with so many other things that were different than everybody else that I didn't feel like I could talk about with anybody.
Yeah, you had this kind of outsider feeling, and that was one question I had. You hinted towards it, is that you mentioned being a Latina. When did you really start to understand that part of your identity? Did you understand way back then? Because you weren't living in a Latina household necessarily, right?
It was half. It was half.
Okay,
Like
you did
my
have
stepdad
elements there.
represented that.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay,
my stepdad represented that. My step family represented that.
okay, okay.
Um, yeah, and then I would say at Hemeter, like there was a lot of ethnic diversity.
Yep.
So race stuff wasn't really anything consciously on my mind because there were, a lot of kids that were Indian
Yep.
and there were,
A
Latino,
lot of
Latina
diversity, Greek
people.
and
Um, if I look back on it, the majority may have still been Caucasian, but I
hmm.
wasn't aware of like racial rifts or anything like that until junior high.
So
Junior
junior
high
high,
was
you
really
started to
when,
notice.
yeah, racial awareness started to come out much more then. And
Do you know
part of that
why?
was because
Yeah.
part of it was because there were a couple elements of it, but there were groups that focused on like there was Latino awareness or multicultural or black I don't remember what the African American group was at
Hmm.
White Pine, but there were like groups that you could be
Hmm.
a part of that were extracurricular and they were
Maybe like
intended
club or something.
to, yeah, they were clubs.
Yeah.
They were like after school clubs, and I started to get really involved in those at White Pine and at
Wow.
Heritage. And and for me it wasn't even like there was a sense of belonging there, but it was also about I just wanted to be connected to my cultures.
Hmm.
And so I liked that these clubs allowed us to like learn about important historical events, to celebrate festivals and festivities, because like Cinco de Mayo was huge in Saginaw,
Hmm.
and Hispanic Heritage Month was big here. And
Hmm.
so that was when I started really getting connected to the larger community, the larger Hispanic and Latino community here, being involved in parades and knowing the restaurants and bakeries and things like that.
Hmm.
And going to dances. I got really involved in dances and I went to a lot
Wow.
of like Mexican dances in junior high
Yeah.
that would happen at like little clubs on the east side and
They had a
stuff
lot
like
of them.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I ever got really connected there. But then there is a key thing that also happened to me that made me think of racial tensions more in junior high. And that was that there were a few Mexican, and I will say Mexican because they actually were Mexican. There were a few
Yeah.
Mexican guys in
Uh-huh.
junior high, and they would like dog on me because mostly because it was like I was in the honors classes and to be in the honors classes was almost like a white thing.
I went to
And
elementary school
I
with those
think,
guys. They're my
yeah,
classmates.
so
Yeah.
so I felt like in junior high, I just really faced this like I wasn't Mexican enough to the Mexicans and I wasn't white enough to the white kids. And I am half white. So like
Oh, okay.
obviously yeah, like looking at me, you would just think I'm straight up
Hmm.
Latina, or
Hmm.
something. And some people don't even think that. Like as I got older, I got, Middle Eastern, Native
Yeah, yeah, right. A
American,
brown girl.
yeah. And then when I started as a social worker, my kids would be like, "Nah, you're black and white." Like they would
Oh,
just like
wow.
had a whole different racial view on me.
Of
And
course.
yeah, so for me, it was just like I had this tension of, okay, I don't belong again. This is why I started to just not care, because I
Okay.
was like, okay, I'm not good enough for you because you say I'm not Mexican enough, because I speak a certain way, because I go to, I'm in honors classes, and I'm thinking like, you're ridiculous if you think I'm going to act dumb because
Hmm.
that will make me more Mexican. And in my view as an adult now, I'm like, how racist is that? Like
Exactly.
you're being racist against your own race to say like you should be dumb in order
Hmm.
to be Mexican. Like that's the
Uh-huh.
dumbest thing ever. And then, I just always had a real sense of wanting to be connected to my cultures, so even as I grew older, I took German
Oh,
in middle
wow.
school because
That was a
my
popular
family is from,
class.
yeah, yeah. I started taking German in 6th grade, and then I switched to Spanish because I was like, okay, German's probably not gonna help me with careers that much.
Okay.
So then I started taking Spanish. But I did take German for a year or two because I wanted to connect to my grandparents. My grandparents spoke German. They were from Germany. I
Wow.
knew the history of my family, whereas a lot of people didn't know the history of their people. I eventually, even as an adult, found out that I'm Israeli, and like left my family left Israel to avoid religious persecution, went to Germany, kind of converted to like being Lutheran,
Yeah, of course.
but what's the word? Yeah, just being, everyday Christian or whatever,
Yeah.
intermarried with families they knew to be safe, moved to America right before everything went down with Hitler,
Yeah.
and started these larger, like what I thought was just German communities in Michigan, and I found out was intermixed with Israeli. Like found out that what I thought was German sometimes that I heard my
Yes.
grandma speaking
Yes.
was
Yes.
actually Yiddish. There was
Yep.
actually Yiddish that she
You're
was
right.
speaking, and I
Right.
didn't know that. So yeah, like that was definitely the time where I became a lot more aware of race and racial
Mm-hmm.
differences, and
Mm-hmm.
racism, even stereotypes. And I will just give one more example that um, one thing that made me really see the racial tensions was, so I was
Mm-hmm.
in one of the Latino awareness groups in middle
Mm-hmm.
school, and all of a sudden this large group of white kids started being like, it's not fair that all the brown kids like have these clubs. And when anyone said that to me directly, I'd be like, well, then make one for yourself. Like, this
Yeah,
is about
super
our
simple.
heritage,
Yeah.
this is about our culture. You can be a part of these groups there.
Yep.
We weren't trying to keep people out. It's like
Yep.
it was awareness. Like, if you want to
Yes.
know about this culture, come be in this club, come
Yep.
find out about it. But no one was trying to do that. And
No.
so I remember that these kids were like in an outrage, and they were testing their new adolescent brain development, decision making stuff. And they were like, we're going to make a petition to say that these clubs should be disbanded because they're racist, and there should be clubs for all people of all colors. And I'm like, that is so dumb, because you have every right to make a club yourself. If you're German, make a German club. If you're Ukrainian, Russian, whatever, like Eastern European, make a club for that. No one is stopping you from doing that. The school had no limitations on
Mm-hmm.
creating something like that. And so they went around and they had this roster they were trying to get people to sign, and
Mm.
as far as I remember, it didn't go anywhere. But I just remember thinking like, what was that? Like
Exactly.
that just seemed like oh gosh, I don't even know. It just was a hard experience for me because it felt offensive, and
Mm-hmm.
yet at the same time felt very juvenile, which of course it was. These were 12 and 13-year-olds that were doing this.
Yeah.
Um, and I just felt like I couldn't reason with this like adolescent mindset of like, go create it yourself. Because
Mm-hmm.
whenever I would go, well, what's your background? What's your ethnicity? Like, what do you want to be proud of? They'd be like, well, I don't know. I'm like,
Mm.
okay, then I don't know what to tell you, man. Like, figure that out. Stop hating on people that are, wanting to do it. And if you want to be more aware of, Black culture, Latino culture, African, the groups that existed, like, come be a part of
Mm-hmm.
it and find out about it and celebrate it. That was the point. So that was just a real interesting racial thing that I remember happening, and it was like the seventh or eighth grade.
Interesting. Yeah, I definitely wasn't privy to that either. That's very interesting. I want to go even further.